Hey guys, I want to discuss today the etheric body and what that is and what it really means for you, like in your daily life. Like, why does it matter to know anything about the etheric body? And there's various terms for it in different traditions. Some people might call it the astral body, the light body. There's a lot of ways of describing it. So I just want to describe it in its most kind of in the broadest sense, in that specific, you can slice and dice it, infinitely. So I just want to give kind of like a broad overview of what the etheric body is, its significance, and also what that means about the nature of this, this illusion, this reality, this physical reality that we live in. The easiest and the simplest way to think about the etheric body and its most basic fundamental aspect is that the etheric body is the interface between your consciousness and your physical body. That's it. It's basically a projection. It's a construct of consciousness that enables consciousness to interact with the physical world. So everything that's physical has an etheric form of some kind. Everything has an etheric shape. The etheric field that underlies all of physical reality is some sort of multidimensional energy. It is itself a projection of consciousness. So when consciousness wants to enter this physical reality, it projects an etheric form, and the etheric form affects the physical world. So you have to imagine that when a human is born, there is a facet of consciousness, a spirit that will see that body as it's forming, and it will begin a process of interaction with that physical body where the etheric shape that it begins to project affects the physical body. But the physical body also, as it integrates and blends with the physical body affects the etheric form as well. So it provides for like a two-way communication. So the etheric body is like an interface. It allows for a blending of the energy between consciousness and the physical world. Not every type of being will have an etheric body. Only incarnate beings, only beings that are physical are required to hold an etheric shape, an etheric form. Your consciousness, when it transitions from this world, when you die, the etheric body that you hold now will be reabsorbed into your higher consciousness. And your consciousness, your higher self will then, presumably will kind of filter what it needs from that experience, and it will draw it back into itself. But the etheric form will not last a very long time after the death of your body, because it's no longer needed. Again, it's only the interface between consciousness and the physical body. So when the physical body dies and it decays, it transitions, then the etheric form is no longer needed. So the personality that you hold now, it's a very complicated mix of your consciousness, which is itself only one aspect of your higher consciousness, your higher self. It is creating, projecting or forming this etheric body, which then blends with the physical form of your physical body, which has a certain structure, a certain genetic line, certain DNA that will also provide like a type of local consciousness, because all physical matter has some amount of consciousness, because consciousness is creating everything. It's creating the entire physical universe. So your physical body already has some, let's say, low level of consciousness that when your higher consciousness projects, or forms an etheric body, and it blends with your physical body, that creates and defines a new personality. And then as your physical body, goes out into the world and you start to have all sorts of experiences, that further affects the personality, because it's now projecting information back into the etheric body, which then affects your consciousness, and then your consciousness can project thoughts into the etheric form. It can affect the etheric field that surrounds your body, and by affecting the etheric field, it can affect your physical body. So that it's an interface. It's a two-way communication. But the personality you now hold is this very subtle and complicated mix of your genetic structure, your etheric form, which will have certain characteristics that you projected. You don't know it now, but you did at some point, which is a reflection of the nature of your higher self, the nature of your true consciousness. That's why you cannot reincarnate as the form you are now, because the form you are now is a very specific and unique form related to this particular incarnation, of the particular experiences that you've had, and the etheric form that you now hold. When you die, and that's reabsorbed back into your higher self, and then you project out another part of yourself into a new body, that personality will necessarily be different. Because as your consciousness, the aspect of consciousness that you're sending out travels down through the continuum of energy, let's say, of this, and as it enters the etheric field that defines this physical reality, that transition from the higher state to the lower vibrational state of this physical reality will affect it, will change it, and then your etheric form blends with the new physical form that you've chosen for yourself, and all that will combine to form a new personality. So, I mean, it's a little bit strange, and a lot of times just in regular language, we say, okay, yeah, I reincarnated. Maybe in the past I was this, I was that. It's not really you, the you that you are now, but it is an aspect of you. So, it's not super important to worry about that, but it's just kind of good to know that, or just interesting to understand the true nature of things, that you right now are unique. You will never return. Another aspect of yourself will return, but that will be a very different, a very different being, because it will experience a different change of frequency as it travels from higher consciousness to the lower vibrational state of physical world. It will blend itself with a new physical body, and all of that will combine to form a new personality. So the etheric form, the etheric body, is a very important part of your personality. Your consciousness can affect your physical body. That's why it's very important to control your thoughts, to discipline your mind, to have, some sort of awareness and control over your thinking, because your thinking can quite literally affect your physical being. So let's say that you're, for some reason, in a very negative state of mind. You're very worried about things, or maybe you're just, you're very angry, or you're holding a lot of hate, or whatever it is. That can reflect itself physically in your body as maybe an illness. Some sort of, disease, or some sort of physical problem that you will then, if you're not aware, you might think it's a purely physical thing, and then you might look for a purely physical solution to it. So you might start taking medicine, you might have surgery, you might do this and that, you might go to a doctor. Really, the whole time, it's you cause it for yourself with your thoughts, with your state of mind, with your consciousness. So that could be kind of like a negative effect. It's not really negative because it's providing learning. This is how you learn. But this is also why sometimes some issues you have, you may not heal because the cause isn't physical. There can be physical things. I mean, it's a big universe, and there's unforeseen things that happen. You can't have a purely physical problem. That does happen. But the problem may be one to do with your consciousness, with your state of mind, with your thoughts, with how you're behaving, with some deep-seated issue that you haven't resolved yet that will filter out into your physical body. That is a way of your higher self signaling to you. It's sending you a lesson. It's trying to get your attention. It's up to you to pay attention. So maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you do, you can affect it. You can change it. This is why things like the placebo effect are real. You can heal yourself purely by changing your state of mind. It's very difficult to do. I personally haven't done it that I'm aware of. Luckily I haven't had too many issues, and I don't know, maybe I got lucky. But it is possible. You can heal yourself strictly with your mind. And in fact, the very advanced technologies that we hear about, like from the Zeta, for example, this is where their concept of etheric technology comes in. If they want to heal, let's say you have a sickness or something wrong with you physically, they don't necessarily come in and do physical things to you and use surgical instruments and things like that, they might see that really it's an issue with your etheric body, affect the etheric body directly, because then what happens to the etheric body is reflected in physical matter. So a lot of the healing technology of the advanced races is etheric technology, which to us sounds really crazy, but it's true. It's just how it works. So if you affect the etheric body, you can affect physical matter. In all physicality, everything that's physical has some etheric reflection, has some etheric shape, some etheric form. So this is where that second, rank of technology comes in. Right now, we're just doing, almost entirely physical technology. Most of our, what we consider high tech is just physical technology. We are aware of affecting the etheric field, affecting etheric shapes, but we don't call that technology. We call that spirituality or, magic or things like that, which is, legitimate. It's a fine way to describe it. But what's interesting when you read the Zeta, how the Zeta describe their technology, it's that for them, affecting the etheric field, affecting the etheric shapes and forms is just another aspect of technology. For them, that's like their higher technology. They don't mess around too much, presumably just in the physical, because if you affect the etheric shape, you affect the physical. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you have more control. I don't know. Maybe we'll see when we get there. But it apparently looks like it's easier or better in the long run to just affect the etheric shape. So understanding a little bit what your etheric body, your astral body, your light body, whatever it is you want to call it, it helps you to understand the true nature of this physical reality that you are embedded in. Because your etheric form is connected to all of this entire etheric field, this unified field of consciousness that is creating the physical world. So that is your linkage to everything. It all happens via this etheric interface and this etheric information layer. What is pure consciousness? I don't know. I really have no idea. I don't know if I've ever really experienced it. Not, I certainly don't remember if I have. It's interesting that it appears to be the case that, according to the Zeta, there are beings that after a certain amount of time, they no longer require physical incarnation for whatever reason. They've learned all they want to learn. Maybe they're moving on to a different reality or whatever it is. And so they will no longer hold a formal structure for themselves in the way that we hold a formal structure for ourselves now. And even after we transition, we still will maintain, for example, a spirit is sort of this etheric body that's still maintained for some amount of time. You're still holding on to your thoughts and your memories and all your beliefs of being a human. And you can do that for a certain amount of time. And then you can even let go of that. And you absorb yourself back into your higher self. And that's the second death that I described in an earlier video. The Zeta say that there's beings, and I bet you there's some of those hanging out in our spirit realm, that once they no longer have any need for any sort of formal shape, they move on to experience different possibilities of consciousness and different possible experiences. They say that you would perceive those beings as just light. It's just pure light, unstructured, no form as far as you can tell, because they no longer require a form for themselves. So, maybe that's a little bit of what pure consciousness is. But I imagine it takes a really long time to get to that stage. And even that stage, it might just be maybe, I don't know, you hang out in that stage for a while, and then there's other things to do which will require some type of body, some type of form. It may not be a physical form the way that we think of physicality now, and in which case you may create a different form for yourself in a different reality or in a different part of this galaxy or this universe, which has a different form of physicality that will require maybe some different type of etheric form. But there's, the Zeta say that the etheric body is many-layered. It's a multidimensional energy. And many traditions that we have, going back thousands of years, we slice and dice the astral body into different types, the subtle bodies and different types that have slightly different functions and effects. All that's probably real. It's true. It's just when you're looking at something that's multidimensional, you're going to be able to perceive it in different ways, and you're going to be able to analyze it in different ways depending on your perspective. I bet you some of the differences that we see from either people who've achieved very high states or even, let's say, different races that might describe things differently. They might say, no, here is what your astral body is. Here's what your etheric body is. And then someone else might say, no, it's this. And it's slightly different. And maybe it even appears contradictory. They're probably both true because it just depends on your perspective. You're viewing something that's multidimensional. So what are you focusing on? What are you really looking at? And what you choose to focus on, you will understand and you will in part create. So I have a feeling that the etheric body is probably just infinitely more complex than we can imagine. And the etheric body is a structure that you provide to yourself from infinite possibilities. And so that is the structure that allows you to tune the consciousness that you're projecting so that it is tuned with the physical body that you choose to enter, that you choose to use as the vehicle for this experience. But the possibilities are infinite and endless. That is why it's possible for consciousness, for your consciousness, to incarnate in different forms as well at some point. Interestingly, the human body has the potential to host many different types of energy and many different forms of consciousness, because once a consciousness knows how to form an etheric body that can blend properly with the human body, many different types of consciousness can enter the human form. That is why there are incarnate humans. There are humans, walking around who not everyone has the same point of origin for their consciousness. Some, it may be a purely spirit consciousness that forms for itself an etheric shape to interface with the physical reality. It could be a consciousness that comes from a different planet, a different dimension. It could be many things. It could be several different consciousness that combine together to form a new aspect, a new facet that then creates an etheric shape to blend with the human body. So a human can actually have multiple types of consciousness or energies that this physical body hosts. When that happens, it creates a new, unique, singular consciousness for that period of time, for that purpose, for the purpose of having one human experience. And there may be several different consciousness involved in that, and it'll be like a fluid, dynamic shape that at sometimes, maybe one of the energies comes more to the forefront, and at other times another energy comes more to the forefront, and it's going to be a fluid, dynamic environment. But that's just one of the curious facts about humans that we can do that. I imagine that there's other races that can do it too. Who knows? Maybe some don't have that ability, or they don't need. I don't know. It's an infinite universe. It's a very big universe, and there's infinite realities. So there's probably a lot of different things happening. But it's just kind of interesting to think about the human form as being naturally able to host different types of energy. And that is behind the phenomenon. When you look back in history of some very, very enlightened individuals who have come to our, incarnated on our planet, and you kind of think, sometimes you see these people, or you read about them, and it's like, goodness gracious, how did this person pull this off? How did they achieve such insights, and how were they able to do the things that they did? And it could be that they are a human that was very, very advanced. Let's say that reached a very high state of consciousness, pure spirit, a consciousness that originates from this Earth system that chose to come back. But it could also be there could be influence from an external source, from a different dimension, a different planet. And I know it's going to sound really crazy to a lot of people, but it doesn't matter because it's the truth. This is part of what we need to recognize as we move forward into this new world that's approaching us very, very rapidly, is that the structure of reality is much different from what we've thought and what we've been taught, especially if you've grown up in the Western world and you've been taught this materialist paradigm. You're going to have to deprogram yourself. It took me about 10 years to deprogram myself slowly. Even though I had a strong instinct early on, it's like something's not right. What exactly is not right? It took me a while to figure out. Luckily I was able to at least get halfway there. But it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people, and it's going to be things like this. If you tell someone like, yeah, there's people that have incarnated in the past, and there are people who are incarnate now who aren't, entirely from our Earth system. You sound like a bona fide lunatic. And they think that you're a lunatic. And okay, maybe you are. From their perspective, you are a lunatic. But it doesn't mean it's not true. And actually, if you think about it logically, it makes perfect sense. It explains a lot. So why should the human body only host spirit consciousness? I don't know. There's really no particular reason that, a priori for that to happen. It turns out it's not the case. Other forms of consciousness can if they are able to form the proper etheric body, can use the human physical body. There's an interesting phenomenon, though, that because the human physical body is so tied to human consciousness, let's say, that generally speaking, or perhaps in all cases, it does require permission from human consciousness, maybe at the level of the oversoul or the higher self. Typically, it appears that there has to be some element within every incarnation of human consciousness, because a being that's completely alien to this world, into what the human physical body is, will not know necessarily how to integrate with the human physical body, which is where a spirit consciousness generally needs to take part in the incarnation in order to provide, I guess, that knowledge of how the human physical body works, because everyone that's evolving through the human spiritual system, this earth system of spiritual growth, you just naturally, from having had so many human incarnations, and you're sort of like naturally an energy that is basically vibrating at a similar enough frequency where you can blend with the human physical body, and not every being that comes from elsewhere will be able to do that. So, it's an interesting. It's just interesting. I mean, to me, when you start learning about this sort of stuff, you can read about this in the Zeta interviews. You can read about this in the Raw material or the Law of One. You can read about this kind of stuff in other sources as well. There's quite a lot out there on this topic, and it sounds so wild, and it sounds impossible. But if you've ever left your body and you know that your consciousness can exist outside your body, or if you've ever observed a good channel or a good medium, you can see that they're leaving their body and something else is coming to their body and it's not speaking, then it starts to become a little easier to understand and to accept that, okay, maybe a totally different type of consciousness can enter a human body and walk around, and why not? Our bodies are vehicles. The Zeta say your bodies are a container, and in many of our religious traditions we say, your body is a vehicle. Those are just two ways of describing the same thing. I think in the Raw material, they refer to the body as a vehicle, a lot. And it is a vehicle. I mean, the vehicle is a really good word for it, because it's just something that you come in and you pilot. You just use it, the way that you get into a car and drive around because you need to get somewhere, and it's easier to do it in a car. Consciousness is doing that with the physical form, with the physical human form. And it's doing that with many other forms as well. So many of the forms that we consider to be non-physical, it's just a different kind of physicality. It's just consciousness using a different vehicle. And so it's creating for itself some different type of etheric body. So an interdimensional race, from our perspective, you think, well, that's not really physical. But it is physical from their perspective. Inside of their reality, inside of their illusion, they are physical in some form. And just their natural laws may be quite different to our natural laws. And so because of that, they're going to have a different set of experiences, which is going to allow their consciousness to evolve in a different way. And it's going to create a completely different psychology, a psychology which to us was going to be so foreign, so alien. It'll make communication very difficult, because we're used to this universe with, we have gravity and we're on planets and we have this, that, and the other. We have all these specific natural laws, which I think we should only assume hold in this corner of the galaxy. I would assume that holds elsewhere in the galaxy or elsewhere in the universe. But all those experiences makes us evolve in a certain way. It makes our consciousness grow and understand things in a certain way. An interdimensional race is going to have a completely different understanding of reality. But it's all infinite perspectives that the Creator is giving itself. So it's just looking at itself. It's experiencing itself in infinite forms, across infinite dimensions, infinite realities. And it's so cool. I think, to me, it's just so wild to think about that. It's just so exciting. I can't wait until we've reached a stage where we have achieved some of these higher states of consciousness so we can start to communicate better with other races out there, because I want to know what else is out there, what else is going on. I mean, I think we kind of get the gist of it in terms of what's possible on this planet. There's a lot of really cool things. I think it's very, very beautiful. It's very, very interesting, and it creates a very unique set of challenges, and I think that enables, I think of a certain type of spiritual strength if you can get through it. That I think in the end we'll see it makes you a very strong type of encapsulation of consciousness, because you went to the school of hard knocks and got the ever living crap beat out of you, repeatedly in 1,000 lives. That's very interesting. But there's other types of races that apparently just have a totally different trajectory. They just evolve in a totally different way. And that's not good or bad. It just creates a totally different perspective. And it's going to be very interesting when we can, provide our perspective to another race and see what their perspective is, and then, compare notes. It's like, hey, what do you think the infinite creator is? It's like, well, here's what we saw. We grew up on a planet, and this happened, and we spent 100,000 years fighting and building civilizations and destroying them and building them and destroying them until we finally learned, oh yeah, you know what? Let's focus on this, and then we made it. And then this other race is going to tell us, oh, really? That's what you guys did? We did something totally different. Oh, what? What did you do? What's possible? That's what I want to know. That's why so much of this, I don't know, what we see going on today, I get it. You've got to learn. Everyone's got to learn. But it's just so silly to a certain degree. I mean, guys, there's just so much more out there. Can we just stop? Anytime I'll give you an example, like what's happening now with the AI singularity. And if you tell people, hey, listen, we're about to go through a singularity. We're going to create crazy technology, and then it's going to help us accelerate the consciousness singularity. And I've had this happen now like 4 or 5 times when you try to describe the AI singularity. People say, oh, well, how can I position myself, how to profit from that? So what are good assets to own? It's like, guys, you're thinking, who cares? Who cares about what assets to own? Who cares? There's interdimensional races, for crying out loud. There's other physical races. They're flying around in spaceships. That's real. Don't you want to go talk to them and see what else is out there? Like, hey, which galaxy are you from? What have you guys found? What have you discovered? Goodness gracious, there's such cool stuff out there. And people here are worried about the 401k and the 30-year mortgage and what's the rate. Who cares? Just knock it off. It's just nonsense. Just let go. You got to let go of all that kind of stuff. And I think that one of the things that when you start to understand and you start to focus a little bit about, okay, I need to, if I can, with my thoughts, affect my etheric body and affect my physical body, and then if I can change my consciousness and try to reach higher states of consciousness, I can change the physical world around me. And then, maybe if I'm able to do that well enough, I can start to leave my body and I can start to go on these little trips and see other stuff that's out there. There's so many more interesting things to do than worry about the stock market or housing prices or this and the other. That it's sort of like, there's this whole, I think for most of the human race, we're just not aware of this other layer of reality, this deeper layer, this etheric field, this unified field of some sort of multidimensional energy, which emanates the physical world. That's there, that's real, and you can venture into it. You can learn to manipulate it. This is why so many of the psi phenomenon are real, because with consciousness, if you can affect the etheric field, well, physical matter is then a reflection of the etheric field. So you want to change physical matter, you want to do something to physical matter, just use your thoughts, change the etheric field. Easier said than done, I know, but it's possible. And that's what the advanced races are doing. That's why if an advanced race shows up here, and then we say, oh, hey, guys, give us the equation. We want to know how your warp fusion drive 3000 works. They're just like, guys, you don't get it. You don't get it. You're still believing the illusion. Stop focusing on the illusion. That's why the Zetas say that they are a dual-natured race, as are humans. Because the Zeta are a physical race and an etheric race. Humans are also a physical race and an etheric race. Because to be physical, you have to have an etheric shape. The difference is, the Zeta say the difference between them and us is that with them, the physical is seen for what it is. They understand the role of the physical. It enables experience. It provides consciousness the ability to define itself, to take on a form, a definite shape, which then helps that consciousness to evolve. This is not the ultimate reality. This is a reality out of many. And we have to recognize that the physical is just one aspect of reality. And it's very interesting and beautiful. I think it's a mistake. Sometimes people that start to become, very quote unquote spiritual, they start to denigrate the physical. And they start to, talk bad about the physical or, that sort of thing. Like the physical is not important. It is important. It's extremely important. And it's very, very beautiful, but you have to put it in the proper perspective. You have to know that the physical, it is what it is. It's a certain reality that enables certain types of experiences. Those experiences can help you to grow if you use them properly. If you accept the lessons that are given to you. In fact, it's extremely interesting that if you sometimes see communications, for example, the same group, the same medium that channeled the raw material channeled other similar types of energies similar to Ra that are actually closely related. So there's a lot of really interesting things, and one of the things that comes out in a lot of the channeled raw material, and also in what the Zetas say, is that, hey, you should appreciate the physical because it enables such rapid growth in consciousness. It's extremely rapid, relatively speaking, even though from the perspective of a single life, you may think, I'm developing really, really slowly. We have nothing to compare to. These other races that have reached much, much higher states, much higher levels of consciousness, they say our development is so slow that it's imperceptible. We look at you and your development is blindingly fast. It's extremely fast compared to what they're going through. And that's because we're embedded so fully into this physical environment. This physical environment provides you intense and vivid experiences. It's a fantastic environment for growth. So use it. Use it properly. Don't denigrate it. Don't ignore it. Don't look down on it. And also don't become so wrapped up in it that that's all you see. So it's like two sides of the same coin. You've got to be in the middle. If you're all the way on the side of the physical is the only thing that exists, well, then maybe your pleasure is the only thing that matters. And some people, take that route, and they focus entirely on pleasure and money and power and things like that because they only believe in the physical world. They only see the illusion. On the other side are people who have pierced the illusion to some degree, and so they think, oh, the physical is completely unimportant. You see that a lot, especially with some of the, you can see that with spiritual people in the past. You see it now as well, where they talk about your physical body as if it's some terrible thing, some affliction, a prison, a very low base type of structure, and it's not. I think you need to respect the physical. It's a very beautiful thing. It enables you to grow rapidly, to have intense, vivid experiences, the ups and downs of life that enables this incredible evolution of your spirit, of your consciousness. All of that is enabled by this, this etheric interface. So this is, I think, is going to be like the big change in humanity that's coming, and it's coming very, very fast, is going to be as we develop our regular AI, our technological AI, we're going to rapidly move to developing the biological AI. It's going to have sentience. It's going to be conscious in a way that, even though all matter is conscious, not all matter displays, what we describe as sentience. That's going to enable us to start to develop, our telepathic abilities. What that's really going to do is that we're going to start to understand the true reality, and we're going to understand that this etheric field that pervades all of the physical universe, because all of the physical universe is an emanation of this etheric field. We're going to see it directly. And once you can see it, and then you see, okay, well, how can I affect this etheric field? How can I affect my etheric body or that etheric form over there? It's consciousness. It's all consciousness. And that's when we're going to start to reach these, this new stage of civilization where we are no longer a physical civilization. Right now, we are very much, the majority of humanity is a physical civilization, believes only in the physical world. We don't understand our own dual nature. Once you start to understand that, then you can see that, the physical is a learning environment. And actually, if you want to affect the learning environment, if you want to affect the physical, you can do it just from within the physical, with building things, using a hammer and nail, building stuff, taking a pill for some ailment that you have, doing surgery, whatever it is that you want. Yeah, you can do that. And you can get some results, but it's going to be a bit, it's rather primitive, really. If you affect the etheric field, you affect the physical world. If you can change your own thought process, your own consciousness, you can affect your physical body. So focus on your consciousness. Focus on your state of mind. If you do that, you change the physical world around you. You change yourself. You can change your own physical body. To a certain degree, there's limitations, and those limitations are important for the experience that you're having. But you can affect it. And whether you know it or not, you're doing it. So if you're holding a lot of negative emotions, that may manifest as illness. And likewise, if you hold on to the physical illusion too tightly, you can affect your transition. When you die, it's important to already have a little bit of that balance and perspective. Otherwise, you may not accept your death. That is what an earthbound spirit is. There's just too much willpower invested in this physical shape, in this physical form. And the etheric form that is the interface with that physical form does not want to let go. So now that etheric form is going to remain for some period of time, not forever, but it's going to remain. That's an earthbound spirit. That's purely a result of your thinking, of your consciousness. And if you take beliefs with you when you transition, you're also going to create that world that you transition into. Maybe you're not going to be earthbound, because you've already seen that the physical is okay, and I'm not going to believe it too much, but you're going to create another reality for yourself that maybe is not that great. You might put yourself in hell because you're going to create it. Or you might put yourself in an environment which is okay, but there's better things you could do. So it's very, very important to use this physical experience to develop your consciousness, develop your state of mind and your thinking, because that's going to affect not only your physical reality now, it's going to affect the reality that you create when you die and when you transition. So this is not something to ignore. This is not something to look down on and to say it's not important. It is important, but you have to keep it in the proper perspective. And that's really what the etheric body, the etheric field enables. It's enabling your consciousness to come in, give itself a perspective, and hopefully learn. But there's great stuff to do. On the other hand, don't sweat it too much. Don't worry about it too much because there are no mistakes and you're infinite. So, you can take a little longer if you want. It doesn't matter. What's another 1,000 years from the viewpoint of infinity? It's nothing. But, if you want to learn a little bit faster, and I think I've certainly reached a stage where it's like, okay, I'm kind of, ready to go do something else that's a little more interesting and a little bit cooler than, the corporate world or whatever the hell's going on. It's like, okay, that means I need to think about my consciousness. I need to start to understand the etheric nature of reality. I need to, focus more on that. Anyways, guys, hope that helps. As always, drop any comments down below. Thanks.